Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. It is good to be back with you for episode 233 of the podcast. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the podcast, and I do encourage you, after you've listened to this episode, to subscribe, rate, and review. And if you think that this podcast, the content shared here is valuable to yourself and to our people, please share it. Let others know about Nora Speaks podcast. In this episode, I'm going to talk about prom. It is that time of year where our young people will be preparing for their junior, their senior proms or their semi-formal dances in middle school, and it's a conversation that we have to have, and I want to have it here on the podcast, and to help us constrain ourselves and understand that it is important to set appropriate limits, and just to share some of the history of what a prom is or promenade is. The idea of a promenade or a coming out of for our young people, the transition that happens from childhood to adulthood, is something that has been celebrated in cultures, for thousands of years. In Greece, there was the symposium where the elite men or the aristocrat class of men, they honored their transition into adulthood and society, and they would have parties, and there'd be drinking and eating and discussions on philosophy and poetry and politics. And the Romans had something similar for men, and many of us may be familiar with the debutante balls of high society. And so all of this has evolved in America. It's something that we have come to do each spring prior to the last few weeks of school, high school. Our young people are preparing for the prom. And I think we should be concerned about the excesses that we see our community doing during this time of year. The prom now is a $1 billion industry. And when we take a look at the prom pictures that are posted, every year I cringe. It's not just the way that our young women are dressed, in gowns that are super, super, super revealing. But aside from the types of gowns and the exposure that our young women have, what's concerning is the extravagance with which we permit our young people to participate. And some of this I know is fueled by parents, mothers specifically, wanting to ensure our daughters have custom-made gowns, or our young men have custom-made suits. The hair has to be done, of course, and the makeup and the eyelashes. And, one might think they're preparing for an Academy Awards. It's so much is put into these proms these days, and it's concerning. You see pictures, and folks will rent a throne or throne type chairs that they have in their homes, and their sons or daughters will pose for pictures sitting on a throne, a child proposed sitting on a throne in their mother's or grandmother's home. There's smoke machines, DJs. I mean, it is red carpets, backdrops. It's a whole thing. And I think about this is like a spring mini Christmas, perhaps, the renting of the luxury cars, the red bottom shoes, the Rolexes that the boys, our young men, are, flashing on their wrists. Where is this money coming from? For people who have the least net worth in this nation, where are we getting the money for the expense? I mean, someone told me that people are taking helicopters and carriage rides to prom. What in the world? And I think about our people and all of the need, all of the deficits that we have, that we experience. A parent is preparing her son or daughter for prom in the most extravagant and excessive ways, and will be down at the school during the summer months getting food so that her child can have lunch. The younger child can have lunch, can have breakfast, because perhaps there's not sufficient food in the home. So families rely on the schools for lunch and for breakfast. And I'm not making this up. This is what people are really doing. And we have this spring Christmas where, we're making retailers rich and wealthy, just engaging in the luxury cars and the helicopter rides and so much. And we're not teaching our young people to live within our means. You can't afford a helicopter. You don't have a car. Why are you talking to me about something as ridiculous as that? We're not encouraging our young people to budget, to plan, to think ahead, to spend within their means. I mean, the prom is such a great time to teach our children important life lessons. And, some of us, I think maybe we're trying to live through our children. We're trying to give them the experience that we wanted, or that perhaps we didn't have in the way that we want them to have it. Or, we may, as it tends to be, trying to keep up with other people, keep up with the Joneses. We don't want our children to feel less than or left out, when it's important or more important to teach our children responsibility, financial responsibility, teaching them lessons, these critical lessons at very important key stages. If you're disappointed that you didn't have the prom that you may have wanted to have, well, perhaps you'll prepare for the next big event that's coming in your life. And there should be more big events coming in our lives. I heard a sister say once that we prepare for prom as if our children are never going to have weddings. And I thought about it, and I thought, there's really some truth in that. I mean, the thousands and thousands of dollars that, we expend or spend rather for an evening, right? And this child has not earned this money. This child is relying on me, or I have decided I want my child to have all of this. And we should be letting our children know there's going to be other incredible celebrations, right? You're going to have your high school graduation. You're going to have the graduation from the 2-year school or the 4-year school or the trade school, or your first career job, the purchase of your first home, your wedding. The prom is not the last thing that our children should ever celebrate, but we plan and act as if it is. in so many cases. And I think, and I know it's fun and we want to see our children happy and we want to be happy for them ourselves. But we should be responsible. We should be responsible. We should be helping our children develop responsible habits early. And if we're not doing it, if we're not establishing boundaries and limits, then they're not going to do it either, because they're not going to have had the foundation laid before them. And I don't think that it's something that is so unimportant that we miss it. I think it's very, very important. And so I think of prom as an example of us being king for a day, but broke for a lifetime. And that's just not acceptable for us. I see our people, we like the flashy things, and everyone likes flashy things. But, debt is not worth the flash, because, debt can last for years, for decades, versus, from a night of a prom, and it's just not worth it, and I think about, we come out of Christmas and we're in the beginning of the year, we're trying to pay off our Christmas debt from overspending, right? And then we have Easter and I did an episode about not being an April Fool, and now we tiptoe into the prom season and the excess that and listen, these people see us coming. The prom industry is a $1 billion industry. And one thing that retailers, that people know about us, is that we are a people without money trying to appear to be what we think people with money look like. I'll say that again. We are people without money trying to appear to be what we think people with money look like. And, people with money, we think that it looks like the flash, right? The jewelry, the cars, the vacations, and it's just not so. And so we wear what we think is wealth or riches. We wear on the outside, and our Caucasian counterparts have stock options, right? They have investment accounts. They have homes, plural, and yet are driving or a Toyota 4Runner or a Toyota Camry or even a Hyundai, or a Honda, and we think that money looks like the BMW. Money looks like the Rolls Royce. And so we have to be responsible and know what that is, and really not put ourselves in debt because we want our children to experience the prom. Our children can experience the prom without all of the extravagance, without the excess, the grandeur. It's too much. And it's not too much just because I don't want, you think, oh no, you're a killjoy, you don't want our children experiencing a good time. This is not about the good time. The fun and the conversation that they have with each other is going to happen regardless of if they're in a $2,500 gown that they had custom made, right? It's going to happen regardless of if they have on the false eyelashes. And so we should help our children understand what's important. And we should demonstrate what's important. We're people without money trying to look like what we think people with money look like. And this is not it. And it is a sure sign of a poor people when we are excessive and extravagant. King for a day and broke for a lifetime is not acceptable. So if you're listening to this and you're planning for prom with your young person, have a conversation. I mean, if the student is going to be enrolling in learning past high school, then we have to think about tuition, right? We have to think about what's coming next. We may have to think about, a used car to get back and forth to campus. We're going to have real concerns. And, king for a day, broke for a lifetime is just something that we shouldn't accept. And, good habits start with the conversations that we have with our young people today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Until next time, stay in peace.
We were brought here as a piece of property. And to keep that piece of property, it is to not allow the property to know the value of the property. What I mean by that, if you had known the history of yourself, you would not have been made a slave. And you won't be a slave now if you have a knowledge of yourself. It's hard to enslave a person that have equal knowledge with you. You just can't do it. And so this knowledge of yourself is the thing that will free you from what you have been suffering from.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, norahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.